Carnival that summer evening in 1997 was alive with bright lights flickering like fireflies, the air thick with the scent of popcorn, cotton candy, and the faint tang of gasoline from the rides. I remember holding my twins' hands, their laughter ringing out above the music, pure and carefree. Emily's curls bounced as she tugged me toward the Tilt-a-Whirl, while Daniel's wide eyes shone with the thrill of the spinning ride. They were inseparable, those two, always daring each other, always exploring together like a single heartbeat split into two. I watched them climb into the ride's colorful car, their faces glowing under the carnival's electric sky, and waved until they disappeared behind the flashing lights. That was the last time anyone saw them. I stood frozen by the ticket booth when their laughter was swallowed by the crowd, a strange heaviness settling in my chest, though I didn't know why then. Hours later, panic seized me when I couldn't find them anywhere. No trace near the Tilt-a-Whirl, no sign in the maze of stalls and games. The carnival's jovial chaos twisted into a nightmare as I called their names, until my voice cracked, my feet aching from pacing the grounds. The police arrived swiftly, combing through the fading light and questioning anyone who might have seen the twins. But with the carnival winding down and the crowd thinning, leads were scarce. The town rallied, neighbors lighting candles and putting up flyers. But days turned to weeks, and the twins remained vanished, as if swallowed by the night itself. I haunted every place they loved, the carousel, the game booths, the food stands, each spot a silent reminder of what had been stolen from us. I would close my eyes and hear their laughter echoing in the cool night air, but when I opened them, the emptiness was unbearable. The investigation stalled, promises of follow-ups fading into polite reassurances, until the cold indifference of time settled over the case. Yet in every quiet moment, every flicker of movement in the shadows, I held onto the hope that maybe, somehow, my children were still out there, waiting to be found. The carnival, once a place of joy, became a graveyard of memories, the Tilt-a-Whirl, a monument to the last moment we had together, a spinning reminder of innocence lost. Even now, when I close my eyes, I am back there, standing on the gravel path as the carnival lights dimmed, calling their names into the night, searching for answers that never came. The echoes of that summer night cling to me like a second skin, and though the years have passed, the ache has never dulled. It is a wound that no time can heal, a silence that screams louder than any laughter ever could. The years after that summer night wrapped around me like a suffocating silence, thick and unyielding, each day folding into the next without relief or resolution. Our house became a hollow shell, the laughter and light that once filled it replaced by whispers of what was lost and what might never be found. My husband and I drifted apart like two ships caught in a fog, unable to find the same shore anymore, our conversations reduced to hollow exchanges about bills and the endless search for answers that never came. The media buzz that once shone a spotlight on our pain dimmed, headlines replaced by newer tragedies and fleeting news cycles, and with each passing month, the world seemed to forget what happened to Emily and Daniel. I would catch myself reaching for their coats hanging in the closet or setting extra plates at the table, only to remember they were not coming home. The silence in those moments was deafening, a brutal reminder of their absence that no words could ever soothe. Friends and neighbors, unsure how to comfort or afraid to reopen wounds, slowly disappeared from our lives, leaving us isolated in grief. The detectives who once visited regularly were replaced by cold phone calls and distant reassurances that the case was still open, though no real progress was made. I clung to the smallest scraps of hope, old photographs yellowing on shelves, the faint scent of their favorite cologne on worn jackets, the memories of their voices calling me from the backyard at dusk. But these became bittersweet echoes that both comforted and tormented me. There were nights when the quiet was so complete that I could hear the pounding of my own heart, a frantic drumbeat that seemed to shout their names into the darkness, begging for a miracle that felt further away with every breath. My children's empty rooms remained untouched, a shrine to a life stolen too soon, and each day without them stretched endlessly, an unbroken chain of sorrow. The pain carved deep lines into my face, and my eyes grew heavy with tears unshed, a constant ache that settled in my bones. Yet beneath the grief, a stubborn ember of hope flickered, a fragile belief that the truth was still out there, waiting patiently to be uncovered, that one day the silence would break, and the world would remember Emily and Daniel once again. Until then, I lived with the ghosts of their laughter and the weight of unanswered questions, trying to hold on to the fragments of family that remained while mourning what was lost, caught in a quiet, endless winter of the soul. 26 years had passed since that terrible night, and I had long resigned myself to a life shadowed by grief, the kind that settles quietly but never leaves. So when I received the call in 2023 about a box found beneath the Tilt-a-Whirl, my heart leapt and sank at once, a strange mixture of hope and fear twisting in my chest. A new Carnival worker, cleaning the rusted framework and forgotten corners beneath the ride, had stumbled upon this battered container buried beneath layers of dirt and debris. Inside, they found old toys, a torn piece of clothing, and, most hauntingly, a faded photograph of Emily and Daniel, their faces frozen in time, smiling as they had the day they vanished. The news spread like wildfire through the town, rekindling memories long buried and stirring the embers of hope that I thought had turned to ash. Police reopened the case with renewed urgency, bringing in forensic teams to examine every detail, every fragment that might lead to answers. I stood at the threshold of that carnival once again, though the rides were long silent and the tents tattered by years of neglect. The air smelled of rust and forgotten dreams, but in that desolation lay a possibility, a chance to uncover the truth that had eluded us for so long. As I held the worn photograph in my trembling hands, I traced the contours of their faces, the faint smiles that had once been the light of my life, now a beacon through the dark fog of loss. The box's contents told a silent story, whispers of the past speaking through the dust and broken remnants, suggesting that they had been there, somehow close but unseen, all those years ago. The discovery reopened wounds that had begun to heal, but never fully closed, forcing me to confront a flood of emotions, hope, despair, anger, and a desperate yearning for justice. Townsfolk gathered once again, some skeptical, others clinging to hope like I was, all bound by the shared pain of those missing years. Friends and strangers alike offered support, their eyes reflecting the same questions I carried. What really happened that night beneath the carnival lights? The police interviews began anew, memories were probed, and old evidence was re-examined with modern technology that promised to uncover secrets once hidden by time and neglect. I found myself both weary and energized, torn between the exhaustion of decades spent searching and the fierce determination that this might finally be the key to unlocking the mystery. As I stood there under the skeletal remains of the Tilt-a-Whirl, the wind whispering through broken beams, I whispered a prayer to Emily and Daniel, promising that I would not stop until their story was told and their spirits found peace. This flicker of hope, fragile yet fierce, became the light guiding me through the long, dark journey ahead. The box was more than just forgotten debris. It was a sign that the past was not done with us yet, and that the truth, no matter how painful, was waiting to be found. When I first heard about the discovery beneath the Tilt-a-Whirl, a strange tide of emotions crashed over me. Hope tangled tightly with dread, pulling me back to a place I had tried so hard to leave behind. The carnival, once alive with laughter and bright colors, had long since been abandoned, swallowed by weeds and rust, but in my mind, it still stood as vividly as it did the day Emily and Daniel vanished. I found myself walking the cracked pathways alone, the memories rushing in like a relentless tide. I could almost hear their laughter echoing through the empty air, see their little hands reaching for the flashing lights, their faces alight with wonder and joy. Those were the children who loved life fiercely, who dreamed out loud and never stopped asking questions. Emily, with her boundless curiosity and mischievous grin, always the first to jump into an adventure, and Daniel, calm and thoughtful, with a quiet kindness that balanced her fire. Together, they were inseparable, two halves of a whole, their bond unbreakable until that cruel night. As I wandered among the rusting rides and peeling paint, I felt the weight of years pressing down, but also the fragile warmth of memories that refused to fade. I remembered family dinners where the twins chatted endlessly about their plans for the future, the quiet evenings spent reading stories by the fire, their favorite songs playing softly in the background. The house felt emptier now, the spaces they once filled silent reminders of absence. Returning to the carnival stirred both pain and a strange comfort, a confrontation with the past that was necessary if I was to understand what had happened and why. I traced the path they took that night, imagining their footsteps, the sparkle of excitement in their eyes as they headed to the Tilt-a-Whirl, oblivious to the darkness that would soon descend. The discovery of the box beneath the ride was a cruel echo of that night, a reminder that even forgotten places can hold secrets, and that the past, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of clawing back into the present. Each step I took was a silent conversation with their memories, a plea for answers, a vow to keep searching. The carnival grounds, once a place of joy, now held shadows that stretched long and cold, but also the possibility of truth. I knew that confronting this place again was just the beginning, that the road ahead would be painful and uncertain, but I was determined to walk it for Emily and Daniel. Their faces, so alive in my mind, gave me the strength to face the ghosts of that summer night and the hope that someday, somehow, the silence would finally break and their story would be told. The arrival of the forensic teams felt like a flicker of light piercing through the long, dark tunnel of uncertainty I had lived in for so many years. Watching them carefully sift through the dusty remnants found beneath the Tilt-a-Whirl, the old toys, the torn fabric, the faded photograph, was both agonizing and strangely hopeful, as if these broken pieces could finally whisper the truth I had been desperate to hear for decades. Every detail was meticulously catalogued and examined, their expert eyes searching for clues hidden in the shadows of time. The discovery breathed new life into a case that had grown cold, stirring old rumors and stories I had heard whispered in hushed tones around town, but had pushed aside as painful gossip. Now those whispered suspicions felt like the missing threads of a tangled web. I remembered how, years ago, a few carnival workers had spoken quietly about strange visitors late at night, unmarked vans parked behind the tents, and odd exchanges that no one dared report. There had been tales of whispered threats and hurried disappearances, but with no proof, these murmurs were dismissed, lost in the noise of everyday life. As the investigation reignited, I found myself reliving those moments, the uneasy glances and the sense that something dark had lurked beneath the carnival's bright surface. The box's contents hinted at a story of fear and secrecy, a tale woven into the very fabric of that place. I clung to every new lead the police shared, even when it was just the faintest glimmer, a fingerprint here, a fiber there, that could unravel the years of silence. But with each discovery came a rising tide of dread, the fear that the truth might be far worse than I had imagined, the thought that my children might have been caught in something sinister, hidden behind the carnival's cheerful facade, made my heart ache in ways words cannot capture. I struggled to reconcile the image of my happy, innocent twins with the dark possibilities that now surfaced. Every time the investigators mentioned trafficking, cover-ups, or betrayal, I felt the floor shift beneath me, threatening to swallow the fragile hope I had managed to hold on to. Yet even in the face of this growing storm, I knew I had to stay strong, for Emily and Daniel, for the other families who had suffered in silence, and for the truth that demanded to be heard. The carnival, once a symbol of joy and community, had become a haunting reminder of secrets buried too deep and pain left unanswered. But now, with the past clawing its way back to the surface, I was determined to follow every thread, no matter how painful, until the whole story was finally told. Whispers that had long lingered in the corners of my memory suddenly grew louder as the investigation reopened, and with them came the fragile, aching truth that some of those whispers were more than just the idle talk of a small town. They were clues disguised as gossip, stories that I had buried alongside my grief, but could no longer ignore. People began to speak again, neighbors, former carnival workers, and old friends, some reluctant, others desperate to unburden themselves after years of silence. Fingers were quietly pointed toward a handful of men who had worked the carnival that summer, their names spoken in hushed tones in local diners and church basements. I found myself drawn into this growing chorus of suspicion, sifting through dusty police files stacked in musty rooms where the air smelled of forgotten paper and lost hope. Newspaper clippings yellowed with age told a fragmented story, headlines screaming of vanished children and fruitless searches, while buried deep within the articles were small, overlooked details, reports of late-night arguments, unexplained absences, and strange vehicles spotted near the Tilt-a-Whirl. I interviewed those who remembered that night, their faces etched with the same pain and confusion that had become my own shadow. One witness recalled a man lurking near the ride just before the twins disappeared, his demeanor uneasy, eyes darting as if hiding a secret too heavy to carry. Another spoke of strange noises and hurried whispers behind the tents, stories that had been dismissed as carnival myths until now. Each testimony added pieces to the puzzle, painting a picture of a carnival not as a place of simple fun, but as a stage where darker dramas played out in secret. The realization that these were not isolated moments, but threads woven into the fabric of that night made my stomach churn with both dread and determination. I could no longer push aside the possibility that the people who should have protected our children were hiding truths that could shatter the fragile peace I had clung to for so long. As I pored over the records, the faces of suspects blurred with those of friends and acquaintances, reminding me how closely trust and betrayal can intertwine in a small community. The weight of this knowledge settled on me like a storm cloud, but within it, I found a spark, a fierce resolve to follow these whispered suspicions to whatever end they might lead. For Emily and Daniel, for every unanswered question, and for the hope that justice, no matter how delayed, could still be found in the shadows cast by the carnival's fading lights. It was a quiet afternoon when the stranger arrived in our town, a man with eyes that seemed to hold shadows from a past no one wanted to revisit. And when word spread that he claimed to have seen Emily and Daniel after they vanished, a fragile flicker of hope ignited inside me, though it was quickly shadowed by the sharp edge of doubt that had settled in my heart over all these years. He spoke in riddles, offering cryptic clues about the twins' whereabouts, details so vague they could mean anything or nothing at all. Yet every word he uttered felt like a thread I desperately wanted to grasp, even as the fear of being shattered again lurked in the corners of my mind. I met him in a small cafe where the faded wallpaper and clinking cups echoed the stories of a town still haunted by loss. And as he spoke of fleeting glimpses, distant memories, and shadows on the edge of vision, I saw in his eyes a sorrow that mirrored my own, but also the caution of someone who knew better than to promise miracles. My hands trembled as I tried to hold on to the possibility that this stranger might be the key to unlocking the silence that had swallowed so much of our lives. But deep inside, the ghosts of past disappointments whispered warnings, reminding me that false hope was the cruelest kind of pain. The trauma of losing the twins had fractured not only our family, but also the trust we once held in the kindness of others. And I remembered the nights when we had clung to rumors and stories, only to have them slip through our fingers like smoke. My husband and I, once bound by shared grief, had grown distant, each protecting fragile pieces of our broken hearts behind walls of silence. Friends had turned away, unable or unwilling to bear the weight of our sorrow, leaving us isolated in a sea of unanswered questions. The stranger's words stirred memories of those desperate times, the phone calls that ended in silence, the countless hours spent searching without direction, the haunting ache of empty beds and silent rooms. I longed to believe him, to feel the warmth of hope rekindled. Yet I braced myself for the possibility that this too might be another cruel illusion. As I sat across from him, watching the flicker of light catch the edges of his face, I understood that his story, whether true or not, had already begun to unravel the carefully constructed armor I had built to protect myself from further heartbreak. The line between hope and despair blurred, and I found myself caught in that fragile space where faith meets fear. The twins' faces appeared in my mind, so vivid and alive, and I whispered a silent plea for truth and peace, willing to follow whatever path this stranger's shadowed tale might lead, even if the journey was painful and uncertain. The discovery of the box beneath the Tilt-a-Whirl had already shaken the fragile foundation of my grief, but it was what came next that truly sent my world spiraling back into the shadows I thought I had escaped. Hidden among the toys and faded photographs was a small, tattered notebook that, at first glance, seemed nothing more than a child's diary. But as I carefully turned the brittle pages, a chilling reality began to unfold. Coded messages and cryptic notes that hinted at fears and secrets my children had never spoken aloud. Each page was a window into their young minds, a map of their thoughts and worries, carefully disguised in puzzles and riddles, as if they were trying to protect themselves even in their writing from a danger they could not fully explain. The more I read, the heavier the weight of urgency pressed on my chest, the faintest whispers of their voices rising up from the past to warn me of something dark lurking beneath the surface of that summer night. One particular entry, scrawled in Emily's looping handwriting, spoke of strange people watching the carnival from the shadows and whispered plans to run away, to escape the invisible threat that had begun to creep into their world. Daniel's handwriting was more reserved, but no less urgent, noting odd conversations overheard between adults and the growing fear that the fun and laughter of the carnival masked something far more sinister. The coded nature of their notes made it clear they were afraid to be discovered, their innocence shattered by knowledge too heavy for children to bear. As the realization settled in, my heart clenched with a mixture of terror and determination. I had to believe that my children had known something important, that their disappearance was not random, but connected to a secret they had uncovered. This new understanding ignited a fierce urgency within me, the desperate need to follow their trail, to decode the mystery they had left behind in the only way they could speak, through these hidden messages. I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with the raw ache of grief, a reminder that time might have passed, but the truth was still waiting to be uncovered, hidden in plain sight all along. The diary became both a lifeline and a puzzle, its pages offering clues to the shadows that had swallowed my children, and a hope that justice could still be found. I thought of their smiles, their laughter, the way they had dreamed of a future that now seemed so cruelly stolen, and I vowed not to let their silent pleas go unanswered. Each word they had written was a whisper across the years, a secret left behind that demanded to be heard. The urgency to unravel their messages became my purpose, my reason to confront the darkness that had haunted our family for so long. With trembling hands, I held the notebook close, ready to follow whatever path it revealed, no matter how painful or uncertain, for Emily and Daniel deserved nothing less than the truth. The more I delved into the history of the carnival, the clearer it became that beneath the flashing lights and laughter lay a shadowy underbelly few ever spoke of. A world where illegal gambling dens thrived behind faded tents and whispered deals were struck under the cover of darkness. The carnival was not just a place of innocent fun, but a stage for secrets and dangers that had been carefully concealed from families like mine, and with every new revelation, the pieces began to fall into a sinister pattern that suggested Emily and Daniel's disappearance was tangled in a web far darker than I had ever imagined. I uncovered accounts from former workers who spoke of late-night meetings where men in dark suits exchanged envelopes and threats, while young workers were often exploited and silenced, their fears dismissed as the price of a nomadic life. Stories emerged of a powerful few who controlled the carnival's operations from the shadows, demanding loyalty and silence, ensuring no one crossed them without consequence. It became apparent that the Tilt-a-Whirl, the ride that had been a beacon of joy for my twins, was also a place where secrets were buried, where the machinery's grinding noises masked conversations of corruption and control. The carnival's charm was a carefully constructed facade, masking the exploitation of vulnerable workers and the trafficking of favors and people under the guise of entertainment. I was forced to confront a chilling truth. My children had been caught in this dangerous world, their innocent curiosity and trusting hearts placing them in the path of people who saw them not as children, but as pawns or threats. This understanding tore through me with the force of a storm, mingling with grief and rage in a way that made my hands shake and my voice catch. The joyful memories of my twins at the carnival were forever tainted by the knowledge that the place I had once associated with laughter and family nights held shadows that swallowed light and hope. I thought of the nights spent trying to find answers, the faces of carnival employees who now seemed like ghosts guarding secrets too terrible to speak aloud. Each new fact brought me closer to a reality where the carnival was not the haven of childhood wonder I had believed, but a dark, dangerous realm where innocence was at risk and where my children's fate had been sealed by forces beyond my reach. The weight of these revelations settled heavily on my shoulders, but within the crushing despair, a fierce determination ignited, a promise that I would not let the darkness win, that I would uncover every hidden corner of the carnival's world, no matter how grim, to find justice for Emily and Daniel. The carnival was a place of laughter and light for many, but for me, it had become a symbol of betrayal and lost innocence, a haunting reminder that beneath the brightest smiles can lurk the darkest secrets. The reopening of the investigation brought a torrent of emotions crashing into our family. Emotions I had tried so hard to keep buried beneath layers of silence and fragile calm. But with the past now clawing its way back into the present, old wounds gaped open, bleeding memories of blame, guilt, and regrets that no time or therapy had fully healed. Conversations that once skirted the edges of the tragedy now became confrontations charged with raw pain, as siblings who had grown distant found themselves thrust back into a painful spotlight, each carrying their own silent accusations and unspoken what-ifs. My own heart was a battlefield, torn between the desperate need for answers and the fear that stirring these memories might fracture what little family unity remained. Parents, siblings, and cousins all wrestled with the weight of responsibility. Was there something one of us missed, a warning ignored, or worse, a secret kept? The silence that had once shielded us became a barrier too thin to hold back the tide of emotions spilling forth. At times, anger flared, sharp and scorching, aimed at anyone and everyone, at the authorities for their failures, at the carnival for its secrets, and heartbreakingly, at each other for surviving, while Emily and Daniel did not. I found myself caught between wanting to forgive and the burning need to hold someone accountable, grappling with feelings that threatened to tear me apart. The house felt colder now, filled with echoes of arguments and tears, where once there had been cautious hope for healing. Nights were sleepless, haunted by memories of laughter abruptly silenced and futures forever stolen. I questioned if pursuing justice was worth the toll it took on the fragile threads holding us together. Would unveiling the truth bring peace, or simply reopen wounds too deep to mend? Yet, beneath the storm of emotion, there was a stubborn flame of determination. I knew that without confronting the past fully, without naming the pain and the betrayals, there could be no true healing for any of us. For Emily and Daniel, for the family fractured by loss, I resolved to carry this burden, to be the voice that would not let their story be buried again. Even as the weight of grief and guilt pressed down, I clung to the hope that through this painful journey, we might find a way to reclaim what was lost. Not the children themselves, but the trust and love that their absence had threatened to destroy. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with heartbreak, but the need for truth and justice burned too fiercely to ignore. As I faced the fractured faces of my family, I silently promised to walk with them through the darkness, to help us find a way back to each other, no matter how long or painful the road might be. I never expected the day would come when someone from that carnival would step forward, their voice trembling yet resolute, to confess a truth I had long feared but dared not speak aloud. The former employee sat across from me in a dimly lit room, their eyes haunted by decades of silence, and as they recounted the events of that night, I felt the weight of years lift just enough to glimpse the terrifying reality that had been hidden beneath layers of fear and deception. Their story unfolded slowly, each word deliberate, painting a picture of shadows moving through the carnival grounds long after the crowds had dispersed, of whispered conversations cut short when the wrong ears approached, and of a chilling sense that something dreadful was being planned in secret. They spoke of seeing my twins near the Tilt-a-Whirl, not with joy but fear, their expressions tight and guarded, and of a group of powerful men whose influence stretched far beyond the carnival's gates, men who demanded silence and loyalty, wielding fear as a weapon to keep the truth buried. The confession revealed a possible abduction, not random but calculated, tied to dark deals and cover-ups orchestrated by those who believed themselves untouchable, shielded by money and connections. I listened with a mixture of horror and disbelief, the room seeming to close in around me as the depth of betrayal became clear. The employee's courage in breaking decades of silence struck me as both a beacon of hope and a reminder of the cost of such truths. The fear that had kept them silent for so long now transformed into a desperate need for justice. Their tale connected fractured pieces of the past, explaining the odd disappearances, the hurried repairs to rides, and the unexplained absences of key figures in the carnival's history. I saw the faces of the men described, faces I had only glimpsed in news photos or overheard in rumors, now revealed as architects of a nightmare that had stolen my children from me. The confession reawakened pain that I had thought buried, but it also ignited a fierce determination to expose the darkness that had long thrived in the carnival's shadow. I knew the road ahead would be perilous, that confronting such powerful forces would test every ounce of my strength and resolve. But the truth was a fire I could not let die. As the former employee finished their story, their eyes searching mine for understanding, I felt a surge of gratitude and sorrow intertwined, a recognition of the bravery it took to come forward and the heavy burden they carried. I promised myself then that I would honor their courage by pursuing every lead, every whisper of truth, until the full story was told, and justice was served for Emily, Daniel, and all who had been silenced. The confession was more than a revelation. It was a turning point, the moment when the past's shadows began to recede, and the path toward healing, though fraught with pain, finally opened before us. The confession from the former Carnival employee unlocked a floodgate of connections that investigators and I had only dared to suspect, and as the pieces fell into place, a horrifying picture emerged. One of calculated kidnapping, ransom demands, and a trafficking ring that stretched far beyond our small town, weaving together the shadows of that night with cold, deliberate cruelty. The threads of old rumors, the faint whispers of strange visitors and unexplained disappearances aligned chillingly with new evidence uncovered beneath the Tilt-a-Whirl, forming a tapestry of betrayal and darkness that no parent should ever have to confront. I sat through hours of briefings with detectives, their faces grave as they detailed how the carnival was a front, a gateway for those who preyed on the vulnerable, exploiting trust and innocence for profit and power. The notion that Emily and Daniel were caught in this monstrous web felt both unbearable and real, a truth too heavy to carry, yet impossible to deny. I thought of the little hands that once clung to mine with joy and certainty, now lost in a world I could barely imagine but refused to forget. The idea that they had been taken, sold into a life of fear and exploitation, shattered the fragile hope I had nurtured, yet it also fueled a fierce resolve to seek justice and bring their captors to light. Investigators pieced together transactions, shadowy meetings and travel routes, revealing a network that spanned borders, entwined with people who hid behind respectable facades while orchestrating unspeakable crimes. The carnival's glittering lights had masked a darkness so profound that it seemed impossible to fathom, but now the veil was lifting, exposing the nightmare beneath. As the truth came into focus, I grappled with waves of grief that crashed over me, their intensity matched only by the bitter anger toward those who had used my children as pawns in their cruel game. The weight of this knowledge was suffocating, but within it lay a strange clarity, a roadmap toward justice that I could follow, step by painful step. I thought of the families who shared my sorrow, their faces etched with the same mixture of pain and hope, and I knew that we were no longer alone in our fight. Together, we would bring light to the darkness and demand answers for every stolen child. The chilling implications of the conspiracy haunted my waking hours and invaded my dreams, but they also steeled my heart for the battles ahead. Each revelation was a step closer to the truth, and though that truth was heartbreaking, it was a beginning. A chance to honor Emily and Daniel's memory by unmasking the evil that had taken them and ensuring that their story would never be forgotten. When the new lead surfaced, bringing a faint glimmer of direction after so many years lost in darkness, I found myself swept into the renewed search with a mixture of desperate hope and a heaviness that settled deep within my bones. The authorities organized teams to comb through areas around the abandoned carnival, focusing on a hidden location hinted at by witnesses and cryptic clues from the confession and diary, and I insisted on being there, standing among strangers who all carried their own burdens of grief and determination, united by the shared quest for truth. The ground was uneven beneath our feet, tangled with overgrown weeds and broken remnants of a past that refused to be forgotten, and with each step, memories flooded back of Emily and Daniel's laughter mingling with the carnival music, of warm summer nights that now seemed impossibly distant and painfully unreachable. The tension was palpable as the searchers moved methodically, scanning every shadow and crevice, knowing that beneath the earth or hidden in forgotten corners might lie the answers we had sought for so long. I kept my fingers tightly clasped, my heart pounding not just from physical exertion, but from the crushing weight of hope mingled with fear. Hope that we might finally find something tangible, something to hold on to, and fear that the truth might be more devastating than I could bear. Every discovery, no matter how small, a fragment of fabric caught on a branch, a rusted toy buried in the dirt, a faint footprint pressed into the earth, set my pulse racing and my breath catching in my throat. I traced the outlines of the place where they had last been seen, my mind spinning with visions of their footsteps, their voices calling out in innocence and trust. The investigators worked tirelessly, their professionalism tinged with moments of quiet sorrow, sharing glances that acknowledged the weight of what we were seeking. I thought of all the nights spent praying for a miracle, all the years of aching silence, and I felt a renewed strength, fueled by the possibility that we were closer than ever to uncovering the truth. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch over the pain and memory. And as we pushed further into the overgrown wilderness that had swallowed the Carnival, the line between past and present blurred. The landscape held secrets that seemed to breathe beneath the soil, waiting patiently for the day they could finally be brought to light. I stood among the searchers, a fragile thread of hope weaving through the years of sorrow, willing myself to believe that this time the silence would be broken, that the pieces of the past would come together, and that at last, Emily and Daniel's story would be told in full. The moment we uncovered the concealed underground space beneath the Tilt-a-Whirl was both a breaking and a beginning, a harrowing revelation that shattered the fragile hope I had clung to, and yet offered a strange, aching peace in finally knowing the truth that had haunted me for so long. As the heavy metal door groaned open, revealing a dark chamber filled with relics of my children and others who had vanished alongside them, I felt the air grow thick with the weight of years lost and secrets buried too deep. Inside that hidden room lay the echoes of lives stolen, worn shoes, faded clothing, and personal items carefully placed as if in a silent, sorrowful memorial, each piece a testament to innocence shattered by cruelty. I could barely breathe as I traced the outlines of objects that had belonged to Emily and Daniel, their presence haunting yet undeniable. And in that moment, the unbearable weight of not knowing was replaced by the unbearable weight of reality. The investigators moved methodically, their faces etched with grim determination, while I stood rooted in place, my mind spinning with memories of laughter and light now eclipsed by this dark truth. The discovery broke something open inside me. Grief that had been locked away burst forth in a torrent of tears and aching sorrow, yet beneath the despair, a fragile thread of relief wove through my soul. To finally know where they had been, what they had endured, brought a bitter clarity that allowed me to begin the long, painful process of healing. I thought of the years spent wandering in darkness, the endless questions that had echoed unanswered through my heart. And now, though the answers were cruel, they were real, grounding me in a new kind of truth. Standing there in the dim light of that hidden chamber, I felt a connection not only to Emily and Daniel, but to the other families who had suffered alongside us, bound by a shared loss that no time could erase. The brutal reality of the discovery did not diminish the love I held for my children. If anything, it deepened it, fueling my resolve to carry their memory forward and to seek justice for the wrongs done. The pain was raw and relentless, but in its wake came a sense of purpose, an unyielding commitment to honor their lives by bringing light to the darkness that had stolen them. As I left that underground room, the echoes of the past lingering in the air, I carried with me both the weight of sorrow and the spark of hope that, though the journey ahead would be long and difficult, the truth we had uncovered would pave the way toward healing and, one day, peace. In that moment of revelation, I understood that knowing was both a curse and a gift, a painful passage through grief toward the possibility of closure and the enduring love that binds us beyond the veil of loss. The day of the memorial service arrived like a fragile dawn breaking through years of darkness and silence, a solemn gathering where families, friends, and the community came together to honor Emily, Daniel, and all those whose lives had been shattered by the shadows that once hid their truth. Standing among the crowd, I felt the weight of decades press upon me, the grief still raw and unyielding, but softened now by a cautious hope that maybe, finally, healing could begin. The arrests had sent shockwaves through the town, exposing layers of corruption and cruelty that no one had dared to acknowledge before. but it was justice served that gave us the strength to stand tall amidst the pain. I watched as names were read aloud, stories shared, and memories cherished, the voices of those lost carried on by those left behind, each tribute a thread weaving a tapestry of resilience and remembrance. The air was thick with emotion, tears mingled with smiles, sorrow tempered by the comfort of shared loss, and in that gathering, I found a measure of peace that had eluded me for so long. The community, once fractured by fear and secrecy, began to mend, the reckoning forcing difficult conversations and opening wounds that, though painful, were necessary for true healing. I thought of the countless nights spent wandering through despair, the endless questions that had no answers. And now, as I placed a hand on the memorial stone engraved with the names of my children and others, I felt a shift within me. A quiet acceptance that while grief would always be part of my story, it no longer had to define my every breath. The ceremony was not just an ending but a beginning, a collective vow to remember, to protect, and to ensure that such darkness could never take root again. I looked around at the faces of strangers and loved ones alike, united by the pain but also by the promise of justice, and I realized that healing was not a destination, but a journey we would walk together, step by painful step. The years of silence had been broken by courage and truth, and though the scars remained, they were now marked by resilience and hope. As the sun set over the town, casting a warm glow on the faces gathered in remembrance, I whispered a final farewell to Emily and Daniel, carrying their memories forward with love and strength. The road ahead would still be long and fraught with sorrow, but for the first time in a lifetime, I felt that the future held a possibility of peace, a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to live with the knowledge that their story had been heard and honored at last.